section, but I found it pretty interesting and thought, hey, you guys might find it interesting too. It's like almost 2 hours long, but I'll break it up into like half-an-hour sections if, the first one gets some views. I know it's kind of late. But if it gets some views by tomorrow, I'll go ahead and break it up into some sections. But we'll go ahead and start right here. And, thank you for letting me ramble on. Here we go.
All that I really wanted to say before we jump in is that I did skip a couple of them from each of these tiers. If it was already something that was talked on YouTube a lot, I probably just cut that one out because I want this to be fresh and I want to kind of bring some new stories to the light. So if there are some that you do recognize, I've got them all out on the chapters down there. So if you see one that you've already heard before, you can just skip on to the next one. The full Iceberg chart with the credits and everything will be linked in the description. But here we go. Let's just jump into it, I guess. So, starting off on layer 3, just below the surface, my mom poisoned me. So I will be honest, this one is talked about a fair amount, but given the fact that we're starting off at the very top, I think that's alright. This is just a crazy story. If you haven't heard this one before, fucking brace yourself, man. This is a throwaway account. Ever since I became an adult about a decade ago, my mother has been against me moving out of the house. I finally got a job as a line cook 3 years ago. My mother and rest of the family, which includes my sister and father, has been against it, mainly saying that such a job cannot sustain me, which was true. They also said that I would hate working, which turned out to be false. About a year and a half later, I quit due to health reasons. The following spring, I got a new job as a computer programmer. While they seemed supportive at first, my mother and sister, who I lived with, gradually became hostile. Eventually, I moved out of the house, and about a month later, I lost my job, and about 3 months later, I moved back home. Everything was cool at first, but as I was getting calls from recruiters and going to job interviews, they gradually became more hostile again, accusing me of being distant and not caring for them. However, they seemed to be very controlling and hateful of the fact that I wanted to move out and wanted a decent job. So for the last month, I finally got that job as a programmer again, but it was out of town. I had just enough money to relocate to the new city, and they became very hostile starting a few days before I left, accusing me of not loving them and of hating them. On the day before I was scheduled to leave, my mother gave me 2 of the styrofoam ramen noodle cups and tore that cardboard covering that normally comes with it and threw it away. I was suspicious that they would try to sabotage my life, so I was careful in not trying to anger them. She gave me a few more food items, which I didn't use, to take on the trip with me. When I arrived at my new city and entered my hotel room, I chilled out. I was to go to work the next day, so after the first day at work, I ate a cup of the ramen noodles and felt ill. I knew that feeling because my sister fed me something that made me feel the same way in late 2011, which I then assumed was because of my recent illness. I felt weak, lightheaded, and short of breath. I drank water to make myself feel better because that's what I did last time this happened to me. Over the week, my mother kept calling me, making sure to remind me to eat my ramen noodles. I was short on cash then, waiting for my first paycheck. I never told her that I ate it. I suspected then that I had been poisoned, and after doing some Googling, I figured it was cyanide. Now that is something that you should never have to think, that your own mother would do that to you. So I resisted the thought, because I simply could not bear to think that. So I went to cyanidetest.com and ordered a kit, and I tried it. Look at the graphics in the video on this page.
Now, excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm coming down with something or whatever, but I keep on having to clear my throat. We have a huge, well, actually, yeah, 2 huge pine trees. And I mean, that pollen, like when it like really gets you. But I want to check this out. Before testing, detecting cyanide. So we're looking at the blue line.
Now, here are the results of my test. I guess I'm going to have to call the cops, and I will never speak to my family again. Alright, this one is f***ed. especially since it has like the actual photographic evidence of the cyanide test. Hopefully this guy got away and didn't talk to his family again, because that is just, I'm really not even sure what to say about that, man. I mean, that's just something that nobody should have to go through. And the thing is, if somebody goes through something like that, where somebody that close to you tries to fucking poison you and kill you, it's like, that's gonna f you up for the rest of your life. So, I feel bad for this guy. The lamp story. This was a comment made on the Ask Reddit subreddit in response to a post which asked users if they'd ever felt a deep personal connection to a person you met in a dream, only to wake up feeling terrible because you realize that never existed. Now, I'll be honest, we've all kind of had dreams like that before, right? I mean, I'm sure you've had a dream that felt pretty realistic, but this is like on a whole other level. My last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. Note, he was 325 pounds and I was 120 pounds. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady. She made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married, and almost immediately she bore me a daughter. I had a great job, and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, she, my wife, bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. I was transfixed. I couldn't look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning, I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first, and soon I stopped that too as I wasn't eating or drinking. I stared at the fucking lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. But by this point, my cognizance was breaking up and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp was not real, and the house is not real, and my wife, my kids, none of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not fucking real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still on inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective, and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises, and I became aware of pain, a fucking shit ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and I finally opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by people that I didn't even know. A lot of them were freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point, a cop scooped me up, dragged and walked me across the sidewalk, and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was still so confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop, seems he didn't wait for the ambulance to arrive, and gave CT scans and shit. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never even existed. I was scared that I was going insane as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but I sometimes see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says. So this reminds me of that one Rick and Morty episode where they have that, like, helmet. I think the game was called Roy, A Life Well Lived, but it was like this helmet, and you'd put it on, and you just sort of zoned out of reality, and you lived this whole life for, like, like 80 years, and you try to see what you can get Roy to do. But in real life, it only took, like, 5 minutes, and you zap right back out of it. Motherfucker. That kind of a thing sort of freaks me out, just sort of, like, mental time dilation. Does shit like this actually happen to people? I guess so. The man who ate his foot. Alright, this one's pretty short, but it's still very strange. So on the Ask Me Anything subreddit, the user Incredibly Shiny Shart, what the fuck, made a post titled, "Hi all, I'm a man who ate a portion of his own amputated leg. Ask me anything. About 2 years ago, I was hit on my motorcycle. They salvaged my foot, but I would never be able to walk on it. I elected to have it amputated. I asked the doctors to keep it, so I signed some papers, I got it back, and with the help of some friends, we cooked up a portion of the tibialis anterior." He then posts a picture of the foot being cooked up. It's not exactly repulsive because it doesn't look like anything, it just looks like meat being fried up. I'll put it up right now. Homicidal Memer. This is also a pretty short and simple one. It's basically just a confession bear meme. There's really not anything else to it. But it says, "My sister has an abusive meth addict boyfriend. I killed him with his own drugs while he was unconscious, and they ruled it as an overdose." Apparently everybody who saw this when it came out was sort of torn between it being a joke or actually being something serious. Eventually the guy got doxxed and people were posting the information all over Reddit. One guy even forwarded it to the FBI before OP deleted his account, and nobody knows what happened to him after that. Red as Blue 101. So for this one, I'm not gonna lie, I'm just gonna skip past the entire first half of the post. It's really just a bunch of needless rambling, but just know that OP and his girlfriend had recently gotten back together after a long breakup. We both let everything out and our relationship was back on track. As I'm getting ready to leave, she asked me if I had done anything with any other girls while we were on break, or any other time we were on break. I told her we needed to be honest, and I said yes. I told her about it. She started freaking out. Wouldn't say a word and just kept slapping me with tears in her eyes. Slaps turned to hits. I told her I was sorry, but if she didn't stop, I'd have to do something back. She didn't stop. Then I stupidly pushed her, harder than I expected. She fell against the sink. This was the first time I ever did something physically violent towards her. I told her I was sorry. She said, leave now. I began saying sorry even more and asked if I could get a hug. She was still crying. I go up to her to try and give her a hug. Almost out of nowhere, she grabs a knife by the sink. Initially, I thought she was just going to hold it and try to tell me to leave. She comes at me in full force, aiming towards my face. I told her to stop. She doesn't. I tried grabbing the knife, but ended up cutting my hands. After a few cuts, I just lost it. I freaked out. I was scared and in a state of shock. Never in 100 years did I think she would use a knife against me. Out of shock and fear, I grabbed one myself. I hit her with it, almost blindly, a few times. I didn't know what happened. I was...
Doesn't it? Doesn't it kind of sound like he's kind of, well, the way the guy's reading it from the man's perspective, it kind of sounds like he's downplaying his role in the whole situation, like, oh, I was trying to protect myself, or oh, I was doing this, or oh, I was doing that, like if it was all on her. Like, his role just seems diminished compared to hers. It's just kind of the vibe I'm getting.
I was confused, shocked, and scared. I had no intentions of that happening. When I left, I honestly thought she just passed out. Then I looked at the blood and started freaking out and just ran. I didn't know for sure that she had died until the next day.
Wow.
I honestly had no intentions of ever doing that to her. I was protecting myself. She was with me the most. We were each other's best friends. We would tell each other everything. Her deepest secrets that not even her friends or family knows. The amount of regret and sadness that I have is beyond words. Everyone else is just reading or talking about it. I lived it. I was there. I did it. Although it was out of shock and protection, I should have just accepted getting hit. Maybe I would have lived, maybe not. Anything is better than living with this. I'm reading the news and they're claiming that it was targeted, or an act of terrorism. Why would I buy her roses that night if I was planning on killing her? I didn't even go home that night. I always have a passport in the car and I decided to just get away for a few days before turning myself in or killing myself. If any of it was planned, I would have taken my stuff, I would have taken cash. I'm in the United States with $200, no clean clothes, nothing. I didn't intend on any of it. It was just out of fear and protecting myself alongside shock. I'm sorry to everyone, especially Melinda's family. I know it will not be accepted, but no, I didn't mean for anything bad to happen that night when I went there. Rest in peace, my beautiful. I hope you forgive me in the afterlife. He then posted pictures of their last text conversations and a bunch of pictures of them both together. Now the thing is, I've interacted with people who were similar to this, maybe not quite like sociopathic killers, but I'm pretty sure I've interacted with a few sociopaths in my life. And this guy is sort of giving off those vibes. It's just sort of this sort of like self-righteous description of a person's self and their actions. Just sort of like how he lightly pushed her against the sink. He paints everything as being perfect and that he was like the perfect boyfriend. You know what I'm saying? And maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to tick off a fucking killer, but the idea that it's just that I'm sure that in the moment when he pushed her, it was a little bit more violent than he's explaining it was. Of course, he's going to want to try to like save his name and make it seem like he didn't do anything wrong. Then again, if he's not exaggerating and if he's dead serious that like this was a complete accident and things really were okay beforehand, then he shouldn't have kept quiet about it and he should have honestly gone to the police right away, told them what happened, and if she really did come at him, there were going to be clear signs of that at the crime scene, and he probably would have been fine. The fact that he lied about it and is sort of avoiding it and is only confessing this on Reddit is a little bit suspicious. So I actually want to get your guys' opinion. What do you think about this one? Do you think he's in the right, or Do you think this was fucked up? I mean, obviously it was fucked up, right? Okay, he killed his fucking girlfriend, but do you think he was acting out of self-defense, or do you think this was a little bit of something else? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. The Whistler. This one is actually pretty hard to explain.
Okay, so I've heard this one multiple times from maybe that chapter, even maybe Mike O even covered it. I know Mr. Ballin covered it. I mean, I've heard this story so many times, and I don't really see the... I don't know what, like, to me, it's just like, meh. It doesn't catch my attention, but it might catch your guys's.
You'll see when we get into this, it may actually be sort of like a supernatural thing. I don't know. I'm not sure that I really believe in ghosts personally, but it's hard to give this any other explanation. So this started in an Ask Reddit post titled, "What is the creepiest thing that has ever actually happened to you?" In response, the user BingBong1234, I don't know what's with all these weird names, said the following: "I've been waiting a long time to tell Reddit the full story of the Whistler. This story requires many details, but it's unexplainable, creepy, and 100% true. I also have video evidence," which we've got the video, we'll play it in a minute. "When I was about 8 years old, I was taking my dog for a walk through the neighborhood with my mom. It was maybe 11 p.m. We live next to a swamp, woods area on the edge of our neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. I remember it being very silent and slightly windy. From down in the swamp, we heard somebody whistling at us. The whistle sounded higher than lower. I can't really describe it. My mom had a concerned, slightly terrified look on her face and grabbed my hand and said that we should go inside quickly. I didn't understand because I was too young, but seeing my mom freak out made me freak out too. After a while though, I kind of forgot about it. 2 years later, I was walking my dog out again, late at night. There's a large bush that could easily obscure a person behind it just next to the front door. As I was finishing the walk, the whistling noise started again. Same pitches, same inconsistent human-like tones. As soon as I heard it, a chill went down my spine as I remembered exactly the feeling of seeing my mom, terrified, looking down into the swamp at something I couldn't see. Maybe she couldn't see it either. Either way, I ran inside as fast as possible. Years went by and I thought about it less and less. I only told a handful of people about it, and eventually it slipped from my mind. Fast forward to last summer. I'm 24, I started dating my girl, Sarah. For Independence Day, we decided to go to Pierre, South Dakota, and watch the fireworks along the bank of the Missouri River. There was a free camping spot behind a hospital where you could pitch your tent, hang out, and see the fireworks up the river. We were near the end of the campground, and there were very few people around us. As it was getting dark, the fireworks began. They were pretty far away, so the illumination they brought was very little. Thus, we had to sit right at the edge of the river to be able to see them. A huge thunderhead was moving in, and a storm was imminent, so the air seemed electric and the wind was picking up. The atmosphere was eerie, to say the least. The police boats herded all the other boats off the river and had left our area to do that elsewhere. Most of the other campers walked up the river to have a better view of the fireworks, but Sarah and I stayed back and were drinking PBR tallboys and kicking it. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a paddle methodically dipping into the water. We saw a figure steering a canoe about 20 meters offshore. Sarah decided to go get more beers from her car, leaving me alone to stare at this mystery person. And then, of course, they whistled at me. My entire body was frozen and covered in goosebumps. It was the exact same whistler from my childhood, more than a decade earlier. I looked at the figure, but it was much too dark to discern who it could be. When they were perpendicular to the shore, they stopped paddling, turned the canoe to face directly at me, and whistled. I was so frightened. I stood up and shouted at them, "Who are you?" They didn't say anything, just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe around, and paddled out of sight. I'm a videographer, so I already had my camera by my side as I was taking video of the fireworks. As the canoe was almost out of sight, I grabbed my camera and got a shot of them whistling as they went away. When Sarah came back from getting beers, she was very confused as to why I was so freaked out. When I explained, she was freaked out a bit too. I was convinced we would both be murdered that night. How did this whistling person follow me after 14 years all the way to South Dakota? Was it a coincidence? Why was it the same whistling noise? Who was that person and where did they go? So many questions still unanswered. To this day, I'm still more afraid of being outside in the dark where I might hear that whistling again. I'm open to any explanations. If there is interest, I will find a plug and edit a little video of the fireworks and the whistling noise and the canoe disappearing. I'm in Uganda currently, and the internet is spotty where I am, so I'll do my best. So after the post eventually got some traction, he did end up posting the video, so here it is.
You whistling? Is it you? Stab it.
And again, I really can't figure out what this could be. I mean, it's an interesting coincidence that this happened to this guy multiple times throughout his life. I'm telling you, I really don't believe in ghosts, but when you hear stories like this, it kind of makes you reconsider. All right, diving deeper onto layer 4, mysterious stores. So this is referring to a post that was titled,
I've also heard this before too, but I don't know if it's this particular one. But people were saying, have you noticed that there are a ton of mattress firms, but there's never any people like around them? And that is true. Like, there are a lot of different mattress firms all around, and I never see them busy, ever.
12 mysterious and identical stores open on my street. What could be happening? Now this is like, they explain that this is like a Twilight Zone episode, and if you've ever seen the Twilight Zone, this is literally like straight out of a Twilight Zone episode. It's very, very strange, but I guess let's just read it. I live just outside a big city in what resembles a suburban main street. Like many suburban main streets, retail business has been rough and they've all closed down. After a month of nothingness, suddenly 12, yes, a dozen, identical convenience stores pop up. They look the same, they aim for the same floor plan, they sell the same products at the same prices. The names are all tiny variations off each other, like Whatever Mart or Market of Whatever, and all clearly bought their signs from the same place, as the fonts, colors, size, and shapes are all identical. These stores see no business that I've ever witnessed, yet have large staff numbers and are surviving way longer than the former stores that closed on the street. When I enter one, they all stare at me while I shop. I don't usually get nervous, but it feels like they're staring threateningly rather than intently. They only accept cash unless you pay like $50 or more. Most of their products are Walmart brand great value products being resold for higher prices. Most of them are expired food products too. I bought bread from one of them without checking because I was in a rush, and it turned out it was 2 months expired. What was even more gross was the dairy cooler, which had ancient milk products. I'm so confused. I feel like I'm in an episode of The Twilight Zone. What's probably happening here? So this one is, again, very much like a Twilight Zone episode. There are similar stories of this happening to people and happening in places. And typically it's a money laundering scheme. This makes me think of what was going on with the mattress firms, and I know that that was like kind of a conspiracy theory. I know that that's probably not real, but it definitely makes a lot of sense because the whole unsettling atmosphere of it, and the expired products, and the markups of like the great value products when you could just go to like Walmart and buy the same stuff for way less. They all sound sort of like a deterrent. They don't really want you to shop there. They just need the front so that they can do the money laundering shit in the back. And not literally in the back of the store. I mean, maybe they are. I don't know. But yeah, something is definitely off about these stores. I was in a cult. Okay, this one is a little bit long, so you may want to grab a snack or something, but...
So I'm going to end with the story after he tells this story.
This is definitely the craziest one so far. I mean, this is some crazy shit. It also took me a very long time to find this for some reason. It wasn't posted in the original location anymore. It must have been deleted. So you'll see why in a minute, but this post was deleted, and that actually plays into the story, and this is actually very freaky. So anyways, yeah, I found this on the Wayback Machine, and it looks like they deleted it just days after that snapshot was taken, so we got lucky that we can still see this. So here we go. In the confession subreddit, a user, throwaway181718, posted the following. First, apologies for my anonymity. I don't want this to get back to me, but I haven't told anyone about this. I need to get it off my chest. 3 years ago, when I was in college, I was suffering with severe depression. I took medication and attended therapy and group therapy. One day in my group therapy, our therapist told us that there's a man here to talk to us. For reasons, let's call him Bob. Bob was really energetic, really friendly, and understanding. He spoke to us on our level, a bunch of vulnerable teenagers. He told us about a group therapy holiday. We go away over the summer holidays and do some cool things like rafting, rock climbing, etc. He explained that it was completely free because the college would pay for us to go, and it lasts 5 weeks. Not many people were interested, but I decided to ask him a few questions after the session. He told me that it was all about adventure, making friends, and having fun, whilst continuing our therapy. I asked for some details off him, but he didn't have a card, so he asked for mine. Stupidly, I gave him my phone number, email address, and home address. Later that night, I was telling my parents about it. They seemed a little suspicious, but I was trying to convince them. While they were talking about it, there was a knock at the door. It was Bob. He spoke to both of them, explaining that it would be good for my mental health. There's also going to be a lot of really good experiences, and it's also completely free. After talking for a while, my parents agreed that I could go. They filled out some paperwork, and the next time I saw Bob was when I got on the coach, with lots of other people around my age. Bob was really enthusiastic, and everyone looked excited, other than the fact that we were all having mental health issues. Bob explained that on our first day, we would be doing an adventure course and building a raft. We drove north to a walled-off campsite. It was huge. As we got off the bus, everyone had to go for a physical checkup. It was uncomfortable, but I assumed it was to make sure that we could take part in the events. When we left, we couldn't find our suitcases, so we guessed that they brought them to our rooms. But when we got to our rooms, they weren't there either. I asked Bob, and he said that we weren't allowed them, and we weren't allowed our phones either. Me and the other boys in the room refused, but then he said it was all in the contract we signed. Reluctantly, we all gave up our possessions, and he gave us these ugly tracksuits to wear, because we don't want our nice clothes to get dirty. We did some activities, and they were fun, but then we all went for dinner. Before anyone started eating, one of the group leaders said we should all pray. I'm not religious, and there was indication that it was a religious group, so I was a bit confused. The group leader said we should say thanks to the gods for bringing us all together. I thought this was weird, but assumed he was just being inclusive of everyone's religions. Later that night, we all went to bed. While we were in bed, another group leader, let's call him Todd, came in and forced us all to stand up. We did, and he told us all off for sleeping in our boxers. He said we should sleep in the tracksuits. So we put our tracksuits on, and as soon as he left, we took them off again. It was summer after all. The next few days were pretty much the same. There were some fun activities, but they were always shadowed by the group leaders acting weird and very strict. The boys and girls weren't allowed to talk to each other. When we went swimming, we went in our tracksuits, and we were really only allowed to talk during these activities. Every meal we had to pray, and the leaders said things like, "The gods will show us the way to the end." And honestly, I was getting really creeped out. We did exciting activities, but we also had to do some more of the boring ones like meditation. They also told us that if we wanted to stay after the 5 weeks, we could, and we could even invite our families to live with us. One evening, I asked Bob if I could call home just because I wanted to talk to my family. He said that my family was already told that I arrived safely and I'm happy. I tried to argue, but he was determined to not let me contact my family until the 5 weeks were up. I didn't know where they took my suitcase, so I had no way of contacting them. That evening, there was a campfire event. It was integrated with the group therapy session. I asked to use the bathroom in the main building and sneaked off. There was a small office that was empty and the lights were off, so I went in and used the phone to call my home phone. I told my mom what was happening and she said that they would come and get me straight away. In the back of the office was another room filled with suitcases and a plastic box filled with phones. It took a while to find my phone, but I snuck it in my pocket and then tried looking for my suitcase. While I was looking, Todd walked into the office and caught me. He practically dragged me out and sat me down in the hallway, yelling at me for disobeying the rules. He took me back to the group and told the other group leaders in front of everyone else. The group leaders were then angry at everyone and started going over the rules. We were all sent to bed without dinner. In bed, I was on my phone, texting my dad, who said they were arriving now. I made sure the other boys didn't see that I had my phone. Eventually, my dad texted me saying something like, "We're outside, come now." So I pretty much jumped out of my bed and ran out as fast as I could, past the group leaders who tried to stop me from running out of the building. Down the dirt road to my mom's car at the edge of the campsite, the leaders were chasing me. My dad got out of the car and locked me in with my mom. The group leaders were saying that I wasn't allowed to leave, that my parents signed a contract saying we couldn't leave until the 5 weeks were up. My dad refused and they tried to open the doors to get me out. Somehow my dad got back into the car without them getting in, and the doors were locked before they could get me out. At home, I told my parents everything. The next morning, Todd and some of the other group leaders were at my front door. My dad told them to go away, as they still tried to get me to come back to camp. But they wouldn't leave without me. My dad called the police, and the police escorted them away. We couldn't see them, but we knew they were watching. I pretty much didn't leave the house for the rest of summer, and I was constantly peering out of my window. When college started again, I left the house on my own for the first time to go get the bus, and as I walked down the road, I could hear Todd and the others calling after me. I tried to run, but there were about 10 of them. They surrounded me on the street. A few people from their houses heard the commotion, and I yelled for them to call the police. A few men came out, and a fight started. I managed to run back to my house and lock myself in. The group leaders were arrested, but the next week a new group would show up in my area. Eventually we moved house, I stopped going to college, and we had to start a whole new life. We don't live in witness protection, but we use fake identities to stop them from finding us. My parents were in contact with the college and the police. The college stopped funding the group, and the police told us that they would start an investigation and that Todd had offed himself while on bail. I don't know much more than that, but I hope that everyone in the group are safe. Holy man. God damn it. Now this post was up for a little bit. It wasn't up for a very long time though. And again, I got lucky with when this snapshot was taken of the page because just a little while later it was deleted by the user. And he followed up with the following. "This is not true. I was part of a therapy group that specializes in helping teenagers with mental health problems. It was not a cult. Since then, I have decided to rejoin the group. I will answer no further questions on this matter. Nothing has been said from this user since. If what he says is true, well, it doesn't look very good." Late night recordings.
Okay, so you guys let me know what you think. I'm telling the 100% honest to God's truth. And anybody who's heard me talk, they know like I talk like a big all round to get to the point. But we had went, and this is me and my ex that I'm talking about. Everything that I'm talking about has to do with my ex wife. Um, we had went to Oregon um, because that's where some of her family lives. But more or less, we were going to go tuna fishing, and that's what me and my ex were looking forward to. While the trip was really more about my former mother-in-law getting to see her immediate family, seeing her brother, her sister-in-law, and mind you, they're in their 60s, mid 60s, and all that. And I never, I'm not a huge fisherman, and I never, had went, sea fishing, I guess you would call it, tuna fishing. I know the captain said it was one of the largest hauls that he had in some years. I know we caught like over 85 tuna, but there was like 16, 17 of us. There were a lot of us on there. But thing about me, when I get really stressed, I'll smoke a cigarette. I don't smoke weed. I don't do drugs. I don't do, anything to, like, any anti-anxiety medicines. I'll take a couple Benadryl when my allergies are really bad. Um, I don't need anything to really mellow me out or whatever. But a cigarette every now and then, yeah, it was a habit that I had even when I was playing football. It hasn't gotten me short winded when I go out and play, basketball when I try to, or do anything physical. I've never been, out of breath. And I make sure to keep it in check. I don't, buy packs at a time. But, anyways, since we were over there, I was already stressed out enough. Because, one, I really didn't want to go, and we weren't married yet. And so I wanted to make sure that, like, I'm in tip top, freaking respectful mode. And one of those were, making sure that we're not sleeping in the same room together since we're not married yet, even though she lives with me. And then I remember what really had did it. Um, I love little kids. I have three nieces. When they were little girls, I used to love, my eldest niece now. She's 25, 26. There was there was like another family basement downstairs, and I had a kitchen. It had everything like the upstairs had. And while my brother was becoming a master electrician, to keep his bills down, he lived in the bottom of the home. And so I grew up with my eldest niece. I was like 12 when she was born. And like she was like my little baby girl. Like she would come upstairs with her Barney blanket, her Barney freaking doll, and she'd be carrying her VHS Barney tape. That, oh my God, I think I knew every word by heart. And she would come and just want to watch it with me. That's how close we were. And we would sit there and we would watch Barney and all that stuff. And it was just like, you know, it was just awesome. And so being around kids, I absolutely love it. Being around other people's kids can sometimes be a challenge because I'm not going to discipline them. And I certainly feel like a snitch if I'm like, yo, your kids are doing this or whatever. Like, so I try to let them know by how, like, by looks, or sometimes I'll be like, keep it down or something like that. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But there was like maybe 8 kids in there, and they had these, bunk beds that they had set up in these thick ass solid oak bunk beds. And my ex came in and lied down, like if we were spooning, but we weren't. You know, there's all these kids there and everything. And she just wanted me to hold her for a little while. And this is when, before we were married and everything. And then she left. And I told her, God, these kids are getting, on my last nerves. And she's like, I'll go outside and have a cigarette, which I was like shocked because when we first got together, I said, you need to accept three things about me. One, I smoke cigarettes. Two, you obviously know I was in the music industry, but a short time before I started working at the VA, I was a director of two gentlemen clubs. And I forgot what the third one was. I was like, if you could accept those things, then, we could be together. And and I smoke cigarettes. I think I already mentioned I smoke cigarettes. She said, okay. But of course, all that shit changes when you get together. Like, oh, I don't want you to smoke. She went out and bought this like fucking $800 Blue Air with this freaking filter that's like this thick. And to get a replacement, it's like $100 and some. Like, just crazy, crazy. I mean, she made six figures a year, so she could afford it. But anyways, these solid oak beds, these fucking kids are like just jumping from one to the other. And I'm playing with her nephews, who I actually do like. Her youngest nephew, I absolutely adored. He was maybe 5, 6 years old, but he was a really sweet, kind kid. It was the eldest who would often, like, you know, when nobody was looking or he thought nobody was looking, like try to like bitch slap him. And then when he would start crying, he'd be like, I don't know, or he'd try to blame it on him. But I seen his little ass do it, except I didn't like, go snitch on him. I would just look at him like with just this deathly look. But anyways, as these other kids I didn't really know were playing, one of the ladders from these solid oak fucking beds started falling backwards and just cracked me on the top of my head that I thought it literally split my skull. So I reached back there and the kids all got quiet as fuck. And I'm like, I get up, I throw on my shoes, go to the side of the house because I told them, listen, I'll be respectful because I know I wish I could have said it, but I know your family's in a cult. But I didn't say. I said, I'll be respectful and I'll smoke away from everybody. And it was already like 9, 10 o'clock Oregon time. And so we're going the side of the house. And nobody knew I had went to the side of the house. I would always smoke downwind so you wouldn't smell it. I would take, rubber gloves, like hospital gloves. Surprisingly, they don't leave any smell on you. And, just throw them in the trash and freaking hand sanitizer and a shitload of Altoids. So I was always prepared, always prepared. And I hear her mom, my former mother-in-law, and her brother walk out. And they're but the width of a garage away from me, silent as can be outside. And I'm not making any noise. And I hear her, I hear my former mother-in-law's brother say, so how do you feel about your daughter marrying a wetback? I was like, I know if I would have told my ex, like, there would have been hell to pay. Because obviously my ex wasn't racist or wasn't prejudiced. My former stepmother definitely had her, like, my mom made 3-4 times more in money than what this bitch did. And there she is, like talking to my mom like she's stupid because, my mom has an accent. She's from Mexico. She naturalized citizen because, my grandma was born here in the United States and all that. And she was born here, but then she grew up in Mexico. And she had to learn how to speak English. She went to DU. She worked for 2 governors. She got a job with IBM back in the day. I mean, she has hustled her whole life. And She's talking to my mom like she's an idiot. Like, oh, do you know what is it called? It's not an Airbnb, but what the fuck are they called? Fuck, it's where people own like a piece of property, a timeshare. Oh, do you know what a timeshare is? My mom's like, yeah, we own several of them. And she's talking about her and her, my stepfather. And she's like, do you ever go out to the mountains, this and that? And my mom's like, yeah, we go to Grand Lake. Oh, how do you afford it? Well, we have a cabin out there. I mean, just fucking stupid questions like that that would be very ignorant. Something that you wouldn't be asking someone. And I don't know if she was trying to make herself feel better or what, but even my ex would get pissed that her mom would be acting like this towards us. And so I could have told my ex about this at that time. I didn't, not until we got back, because I knew that would have fucked up the whole trip for everyone. And I really, really, really loved being around her brother and her sister in law. I don't know why. They were just really nice and fun to be around. I could do without the mom, but just her brother and her sister in law were just, it was fun to be around them. They always did something fun or exciting and something out of the norm. Or I got to show the kids, like the Lego movie. I had a 3D TV at the time, or things like that. I just loved being around them. But didn't mention anything to my ex. Now, this is where things get weird. We go tuna fishing the next day, and I don't know how many miles, like 50, 60 nautical miles are. If they're miles, then they're just miles, but nautical wise, I don't. It was just a long ass boat ride. I remember that. Um, I know my ex threw up. I came close. I didn't like that feeling whatsoever. I couldn't get used to it. But I mean, after one or two, I mean, for anyone who's gone tuna fishing, you guys know that that shit is tough as fuck. Like after one or two of them, like I was spent. But no, I mean, shit you not, we caught 85 fish and I deleted it. It sometimes comes up in a memory. But I mean, you could see just a row of how many there are, and I'm gonna pause and see if actually I do have it somewhere because it is crazy. Okay, so I cropped out their faces, but this is just like we weren't even finished unloading the boat. That's how many fucking tuna we caught. I must have picked up like 10 pounds of muscle just in that one day. Anyways, to get back around to the whole story, I hear this comment being made, but yet their church is so religious. Like everything is done by the King James Version. And for those of you familiar with that, it's usually like thee, thou, shall, uh, all those old words that, you know, a lot of old schoolers grew accustomed to. So the way I grew up was non denominational. You walk into church, everybody's greeting one another, this and that. There, you go in and it's just held at somebody's house. Everything's quiet, nobody's saying shit. I'm fucked if I pass gas or something, man, because these people are like not saying anything. And all they do is go around and say, like, oh, I want to be better at this, and, God forgive me for that. And I felt like saying, well, you know, my ex mother in law's brother calls me a wetback. And then the guys I go fishing with, they're all white dudes, which I'm used to because I've told you guys plenty of times I went to an all white, school pretty much. And one guy was wearing an Xbox shirt. I'm not an Xbox fan. I love PlayStation. But just to, make conversation, he's like, yeah, no. Like, just straight up ignoring me. And I could tell this dude's fucking prejudiced. But then they're here at this, they called it the gathering. And that's how they describe their sins. and then they sing hymns, and that's it. And I'm like, the fuck is this? And so what really scared me about the cult part, um, my ex grew up in this. She said she was never allowed to watch TV when she was older. That her dad used to beat the shit out of her, uh, even if her brother was the one who had done something. Um, like, her dad wasn't a part of this cultish group either. But I've tried to use this so many times and I don't know how to get information about it because it could change a lot in my custody case. For instance, they have what they call leaders. And every 2 weeks, these leaders go and stay at a parishioner's house. Now, here's the odd thing. Every male is like extremely successful in something. Uh, FBI agents. My former brother-in-law was like, I'm not going to say which railroad, but like vice president of if the train, if there's train derailments or track problems or whatever, like he's ahead of the department that goes out and assesses them. Like all these men are like very successful. My ex graduated summa cum laude, 4.0. She got a scholarship out of 5,000 people for the job of the Department of the Interior. And, when we met, I happened to be working, for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And, we didn't meet through that connection or anything. Because they weren't allowed to watch TV. They were only allowed to read books. Okay, nothing wrong with that. I've heard that plenty of times before. But here's the thing. These so-called leaders would go and stay at parishioners' houses. The parishioners would keep them there for 2 weeks, excuse me. They would feed them. They would clothe them. They would provide them food, meals, and then they would have a worship every single night. Now, when they left, I'm talking about the leaders, the people who hosted these leaders gave them money. I don't know how much, but I had once asked, how much money are you talking about? They're like, and my ex being an accountant for the Department of the Interior, she said they have enough money to buy a building, buy more than one or two buildings, to, do their thing. I'm like, what would you guess? She's like, 25, 35 million. I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. And they do this like they don't allow or want TV. And I know what a lot of people are gonna say, but the women wear their hair in a buns, and they're only allowed to wear dresses or skirts or whatever that have to go down to their ankles. And it's not, Church of Latter-day Saints. It's not Pentecostal. It's none of those. And I would belabor my ex. I'm like, what is the name of it? What is the name of it? Because obviously my ex wasn't a part of it when we met. I mean, her mom disliked me for like a fucking month because when we got together, my ex was very materialistic. We used to have a cedar closet in our home, and she had boxes upon boxes of Louis Vuitton purses, Coach purses, fucking any kind of purse that's expensive that you could think of was in this cedar closet. And I'm thinking, a box for a purse? Like, this is, Coach purses. I mean, she used to buy me like 3-4 bottles of Chanel Blue at a time. Still my favorite cologne, but I don't want to wear it anymore because it just brings back memories of her. She would buy me Citizens of Humanity jeans. I don't know if you guys know what those are, or if they even still make them, but they're $300 fucking dollars a piece. We go one day to Cherry Creek Mall and she buys 3 pairs for me. And I'm like, the hell are you doing? Little did I know, this is how shitty their little cult thing is as well. When somebody gets divorced, they're kind of shunned from their thing unless they pay their way back in financially. They have to pay their way back in. Her mother had to do it when my ex's father left her mom. The mom had to pay to get back in. The mom had like a 900 credit score, but she never bought anything, that was really worth value, like, a big car or house or anything like that. So it was, you could have a high credit score, but if you haven't bought anything big, then, it doesn't really matter. My ex, on the other hand, she filed for bankruptcy from her first marriage because they bought this gorgeous ass house and they couldn't afford it when they separated. So I thought it odd when she asked, because we lived in this really nice neighborhood, she asked, hey, do you think your brother will be able to install like one of those big, lock boxes that would be attached for the mail? I'm like, yeah. So my brother wastes his time. He goes and he installs it because he had the tools. I didn't. And like 3 weeks later, my key goes missing. I think nothing of it. Now, this is around the time, mind you, this is some years later after the first incidents and all that. And my key goes missing. I think nothing of it because I'm always misplacing shit. Come to find out, she's starting to buy her way back into this cult because, one, I take her to go, she wanted to get her ears pierced because she's very materialistic. So she wanted, princess cut diamond earrings. She bought those and had her ears pierced, which was a huge sin. And it was all this Mexican's fault. Her wedding ring, I shit you not, was $35,000. And mine was just solid platinum. I mean, heavy as. This thing was, heavy as fudge. I mean, they threw away money like it was nothing. And then while we're going through the divorce, they're like, okay, well, you guys got to claim which ones are your expenses, this and that. I find out that this bitch, excuse me, but she opened up 18 credit cards under my name. She was going through bankruptcy and paying off her bankruptcy, knowing she couldn't qualify for credit, but she made 6 figures a year. And she used my credit, which was fucking excellent, and opened up revolving credit. You're talking about Sephora, Mac, Tiffany's, Saks Fifth Avenue, fucking anywhere you could think of. Louis Vuitton, Sunglass Hut. I mean, Coach. You name it, she opened a credit card there. And revolving credit is the worst to have. And she fucked up my credit for life. I mean, the courts really favored her. They only gave me her TPS plan, or TSP, Thrift Savings Plan, which didn't even cover a quarter of what she did to me. But it was buying her way back into this cult thing, because once we divorced, the look came back and everything, and I only noticed it because, whenever I would go get the baby or whatever, she married a guy who was back in that religion and everything, and I'm sure her mom was just over the moon, and I didn't care, but I never could find the name of it. And it was funny because the lady who I was seeing for, the custody, they always say it's good to go to, these parenting classes for the men. It shows that you're really trying to be a good father. So I went there, and this lady, she actually used to be a seminary student, and I was telling her about this, and she's like, you need to find the name for me. I said, I can't find the name for you. I have no idea what the name is. And to this day, I have no idea what the name is. Like, I could spot them from a mile away because they're always wearing their hair in a bun, dressed down to their ankles. But it's not like the Pentecostals or any of those religions. Like, you could just tell. Like, the women are stay-at-home women. You know, the men, make a shitload of money, but they don't live this lavish lifestyle. It's just, it scares the shit out of me for my daughter. And I have no way of finding out other than trying to hire a private detective. I have no idea how to do this. If you guys ever heard of something like this, let me know. Because I'm truly, like, scared for the sake of my daughter and everything. And I just need to find out the name of what the hell this thing is, because my ex had claimed rape before. But when she brought up a subject like that, I didn't press her for who, what, when, where, and why. And now I wish I did. Because if it had anything to do with that cult, I'd be 10 times more afraid. 20, 30. I already am. So I don't know if it was them or not, but if you guys know, might have some information, hit me up and let me know. Sorry for the rambling. This is way longer than I expected, so I doubt you guys are going to stick through, but hey, I'm going to go ahead and go on the second part where we left off of. So thank you guys for watching. Be back.